All right. It is the top of the hour, and that means it is time for 2-on-1 because it's Wednesday, and it's time for 2-on-1 because here we are. I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
And I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall, vaguely losing her voice, but excited to be here.
Me too. I'm just loving June, and I'm loving things that are weird and strange. And how are things on your end?
Do I look a whole year older?
Why, you do. Did you have a birthday?
I did. I had a lovely birthday last week, the day after we recorded, and it was delightful. And I got some delightful presents and wonderful people, calling and wish me happy birthday. Thank you to all the deuces out there that reached out, as you did. We have fans, people I have no idea who you are, wished me happy birthday, and it was very kind, and I am very grateful.
Well, that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I have been sweating like a madman because my daughter has started softball. And for some odd reason, it's game Monday, practice Tuesday, game Wednesday, all at like the sun is right on top of you time. So I now carry an umbrella and a lawn chair, and my kid isn't embarrassed by me yet and probably never will be. So life is good out here.
She's a keeper. I
Yeah.
love that. What's her position?
So she should play third base because
Okay.
she can really fire it across the field, but they rotate everybody through, and she knocked a ball way out into right field. I was very proud of her. Not that her performance is what I base my pride on. She did a good job.
Her performance is what I base my pride on, so I'm very proud of her. No, I'm just
Okay.
kidding. I'm just kidding. I've met her only virtually once. She's a delight. I'm rooting for her team no matter what. As someone who grew up, my family's a big softball family. My whole family plays softball. And like my dad, my mom, that's how I learned to keep score, was going to my parents' softball games when I was a kid.
Cool.
And so softball is I just assume every family has softball nights because we did. And so now that you do, I love that for you. So
we're starting a team here in Wichita for the adult league, and it's all of the gay ministers I know and our spouses, and I really want to call the team Queer Reverent. So
I'm here for it.
yeah. Maybe not. So hey, I did want to ask you a question because I've been reading about my dear friend Frank of Assisi. Do you know that quote, preach the gospel at all times, when necessary use words? It's misattributed to him, right? But let's pretend he was talking about liturgical art.
He definitely wasn't. I do know the quote. And one day on 2-on-1, I will tell my call story that has a lot to do with being in Assisi.
Did you
going.
Did you pass by a Cappadocian?
But I will tell it at a later date, maybe next week. But I can tell you for sure, I'm like 90% positive he was not talking about liturgical art for that comment.
He wasn't. Okay.
I mean, but it's only because liturgical art very much tells a story. It's like visually stained glass windows are beautiful, and they play with light and color, and they offer a deeper truth.
And it's the same with banners and paraments and frontals. You can probably guess where this is going. We surround ourselves with green in this season. It's the season of growth.
And purple for Advent, which is unbelievably so much sooner than any of us think.
It's June.
I know it's June.
Okay. And of course, stoles, which symbolize the yoke of Christ. I mean, we're as far, okay, whatever. Then we layer meaning on top of those stoles. Oh, what you got there?
I just received my custom, and you know that is one of my favorite words for clothing and articles and liturgical wear is custom. My custom stole from Jeff Weinrow Design. It is a rainbow stole because it is pride, and I bless and affirm and rejoice in the full spectrum of humanity, as we all know. It has a multi-hued protest fist because we are stronger together when we are stronger together. And on the back, this is one of my favorite little hidden gems, is the disciples chalice on my nape because I am a disciple.
And it's short because you are not as tall as some people.
I am not as tall as some people, and I am taller than some. That's how
And I don't mean
height
that.
works. But you are so right. The stole says a lot of things about me, about God, about my community and my faith. It was handmade intricately and purposefully by the folks at Jeff Wenrow Designs, and I'm so grateful.
Maybe they could use like Psalm 139. It's fearfully and wonderfully made. Jeff Wonder Designs has been making ordinary time extraordinary for 16 years, providing liturgical textiles for all kinds, heights, theologies, denominations, and seasons. Check out their full catalog and customization options at Jeff Wenrow, JEFFWUNROW.com after the show.
And our listeners have an exclusive coupon 2-on-1. It is all one word. There is no letters. It is just 2-on-1. You do it at checkout.
Yeah.
Sorry, there are no numbers. Yes, there are letters. There's all letters. No numbers. 2-on-1 at checkout for 15% off your entire stole order. So if you want to get yourself a Pride stole, and let's say you got a buddy who's getting ordained, you can get them a Pride stole too. It took me 4 years to get my first Pride stole. And that is too long for someone whose call to ministry is tied to the expansiveness of God's love for all creation.
Well, it's the best deal he offers just for our listeners and viewers, our deuces.
Yay. No one's objected to it yet, so I guess it's staying, and I'm very grateful.
Deuces. And once again, JeffWenrow.com. Thank you for being our sponsor, Jeff Wenrow Designs. And let's get weird, Spiff.
Oh my gosh, our guest today is one of my very favorite people that I met in seminary. It was one of those like 2 peas in a pod when we met. I took him for when he came to visit the dinner that our seminary. I was his, thank you, that's the word. I was like, what is I was his recruiter. I think me and Annie Grogan took him out. We'll ask him. But Nick Koontz is here, and we are talking about Twin Peaks.
Doom, 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 doom.
Let's bring him in.
I'm trying. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Hey, all right.
Hey.
Nick Koontz, welcome to 2-on-1.
Thank you.
We are stoked to have you. I was just saying, I believe, wasn't I your recruiter for seminary? Didn't I take you to dinner?
You did, yeah. You and Catherine Wright.
Oh, it was Catherine, not Annie.
Yeah.
And we had and I remember thinking like, oh, this guy's cool. Like, I hope he comes. And I did not always think that with the people that I recruited. So I'm very glad that you did come to Bright, and we had, I think, 2 full years together.
It was a beautiful and cherished memory by all.
By all.
Well,
it's true.
So Nick is joining us today about Twin Peaks, and sometimes we recruit guests, and sometimes guests volunteer. And Nick not only sent us like hey, I'd like to do Twin Peaks. Nick sent us like a comprehensive spreadsheet about Twin Peaks, and it's amazing. So we were like, we need to do this as much as possible. So Nick, you're very thorough in Twin Peaks. We always kind of like talk about context and where everyone is. I don't think Spiff or I can even begin to compete or match the intensity with which you've really engaged with the show. But Spiff, how do you start?
I mean, I started with Twin Peaks this last week. So I know, but to be fair, so Nick reached out to me privately months ago and was just like, I want to do this. And I was like, let me know when you want to do it. And then he's like, okay, I got to think about it. And then came back to us with this spreadsheet that our other guests out there, my friends, like he is up the bar as to exactly, there's a full 20-page spreadsheet of episode guides and content and characters.
Is what I'm going to do. I'm going to share the screen of this. So just so people can see, like, this is
if I can. So right now we're in the episode guide up top. And on the left, I have what's generally considered good episodes, okay episodes, and bad episodes in green, yellow, red.
Well,
I read the key at the bottom. A good key for a spreadsheet is my jam.
This is the kind of podcast where a yellow light means slow down rather than speed up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for those of you that are on the podcast and listening to us and you can't see what Arthur just showed, it is literally just an
Not exhaustive. I haven't cracked the case yet.
It's true. But it was so helpful for someone who was new to the storyline, new to the world of Twin Peaks. And like I feel like I grew up being like, who killed Laura Palmer? Like I knew the like concept, but had never engaged it. Nick, tell us a little bit about one, who you are, where you're serving, what are you doing, but then also how did you get into Twin Peaks?
Yeah, okay. So I'm Nick Koontz. I'm serving as senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Um, I'm just enjoying it. As far as how I got into Twin Peaks, I knew it was one of those shows that, made by David Lynch, that whole thing that I was supposed to get into. And in college, I was doing that whole thing where, you listen to all sort of the precocious hipstery thing where you listen to all the albums and all the books and the movies. And so a couple of us ended up watching Twin Peaks just because we were supposed to. And it was just bizarre. I did not understand it, and I put it away. Um, and then a couple of years ago in 2017, Showtime picked it up for a third season, like 25 years after it was made. And so I figure, oh, well, I'll watch that. And I watched that, and it just, it just slapped. Every 18 episodes of it just slapping. Um, and so then I had to go back and I had to rewatch the show and the movies and figure out a little bit from the companion books. And I slowly I realized that it's been almost 30 years and we have yet to crack a case. And everyone's just saying it's unanswerable. And I think to an extent with David Lynch, that's true, but I think he can get much better answers than where we're at so far.
So for those of you not in the know about Twin Peaks, which is interesting because arguably Twin Peaks transformed popular culture in the United States, like Hamilton level transformation of pop culture. Twin Peaks was a show that ran for 2 seasons originally on ABC in 1990 and 1991. It was primetime, like mystery, horror, surreality. First season
soap opera too.
Was David Lynch and Snow. What was his name?
Mark Frost.
Mark Frost.
The second season, Frost and Lynch were not direct overseers, and the second season is pretty much widely panned. And again, there was that big gap of 16 years before 2017. There was also a prequel movie, Firewalk with Me, but it was also a sequel because, again, it's a super weird show, and it's meant to be. Just in case you were somehow in a cave and have never heard of Twin Peaks or engaged it. I will say, I started watching Twin Peaks when I was like 10 because Who Shot Mr. Burns was the Simpsons thing. And Chief Wiggum has a warm cream induced dream where he goes into this room and Lisa Simpson comes out, "This suit burns better, look." And it's a Twin Peaks send up because why not? Until she finally has to just tell the idiot police chief what to look for. But anyways, started watching it at that point. Shouldn't have at 10. Terrified.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I feel like I caught bits and pieces of it in elementary school just because kids had older siblings that were watching it or parents, and it was like the talk, like, I was I was right around that age, but it was not something that I engaged with. And I'm kind of bummed about it because I watched a handful of episodes, as much as I could get through in the last week from knowing what was happening. And it has that kind of sense of humor, that irreverence kind of to it that I really like. It feels like early Wet Hot. Like there's the silly like Wet Hot American Summer, like
it's a send up in part.
Yeah, like that, like they're walking through the hall and students are happy, and then one kid just like kind of like moonwalks away for no reason, like in front of the camera in episode 1. And I was just like, oh, this is like in Wet Hot when anytime anybody throws anything, like a giant shattering sound happens as an effect just because it's silly. And it breaks the wall of the need for the seriousness of it all, especially because it's like this murder series. And I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I told people earlier, I was like, I'm kind of losing my voice.
Yeah. Well, so the whole premise basically is FBI agent Dale Cooper goes to the town of Twin Peaks because this girl, Laura Palmer, has been found dead. and it seems like it's similar to a collection of murders that had happened before. And so he shows up and he just sort of falls into this weird, spooky world that, it's David Lynch. And so all his stuff, like he sort of shows small town Americana and its seedy underbelly. But then underneath that seedy underbelly is a spiritual realm where all sorts of even worse stuff happens. And they start to interact through like dreams and visions. And then they start to like, there's possessions in a weird way and like going into the strange world. And it just slaps. I'll say that the second season, the reason it's not that good is because ABC, so the question, who killed Laura Palmer, was supposed to be sort of a red herring. And they just, keep exploring the world while keeping that sort of on the back burner. But ABC forced them to reveal the killer in the middle of the second season. And so that got a huge amount of views. Everyone watched that episode. And then they had nothing. And so David Lynch and Mark Frost really walked away from the majority of that second season. And so there's about 8 episodes that are just not good. And then they came back to try to save it and put it on a cliffhanger. And that's where the show just ended for 25 years. So they did do that prequel sequel movie, which is extremely intense, very graphic. Would not recommend. But then they got the Showtime series and they got it back.
There you go.
So I want to ask a few questions that you brought up, if I could.
Yeah.
I like it. So, Spiff brings up the show defies expectations. It's like the campiness of Dale Cooper. I love it. That's why I'm drinking damn good coffee right now. He's camp, in part.
Yeah.
And so Richard Rohr famously said that expectations are the root of resentment. And if this show refuses to allow expectations to form, I feel like we can't engage in it the way we would engage in, say, Family Matters, or I don't know why Family Matters came up. Actually, ABC in the 90s, that's why. But we wouldn't engage in it with regular media. And therefore it can be more pioneering. It can do weird stuff, and people also without expectations would then be able to just have the story told to them. I think the church thrives on expectations. I think clergy are paranoid with expectations, and I think congregations lean into them even if they're not there. How do we develop a Lynchian model for congregational life? How do we break expectations in the church? I hope you weren't hoping for like softballs. Apparently, that's
that's good. Also, I guess the thing that comes to mind, the Lynchian perspective to me is sort of this surrealist, defying expectations, defying rigidity, and putting things into boxes that you see in Twin Peaks and really most of his work. And he almost, it seems to me like he's taking scenes and kind of boiling them down to archetypes and then reconstructing them. And I guess this may just be with really all surrealism, that the way he keeps on defying expectations, I think, is by showing us things that are true that may not necessarily be real. And so he's very honed in on the truth, but not necessarily reality, if that makes sense.
Well, I think we need to play a little bit more into that, and I think we veer into the sacramental.
Yeah.
I've told our very literally minded folk is that something can be true without it being factual. Okay. How do we communally create or name truth? Or I guess meaning would be a good word for that too.
Yeah. I have to think on that. You got to give me a minute.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not used
to good. Oh yeah.
Before they speak, so I'm just thrown off by that because I don't do that myself. That's a joke at my own expense.
You did it. Okay, so I'll take us a different way. If I might. So I like the idea. So I'm a West Wing person. We've all talked about this, and when creators of stories leave the story, like, or leave the oversight of telling that story, we generally get this character expansion that maybe we hadn't seen coming, maybe we don't like, lots of different ways. Is there something the church can learn from opening itself up to allowing others to tell their story rather than having singular narratives or singular interpreters tell the story? Like getting away, like, the reason we don't like the second half or the second season being that it doesn't feel as authentic to Lynch as the original vision, and yet something still happens, right? Even though we may not like it, we now know that we don't like it, right? It holds the duality of what can be. And I wonder if we as the church could learn something from that. Like, how often do we as pastors open our pulpits to new voices? How often do we let lay leaders run with an idea that maybe we think is bad, but like, but they don't, or whatever? And I'm not saying any one of our churches does or doesn't do any of these things. I mean, kind of writ large for the church. What does it look like to take our hands off the steering wheel and let someone else drive for a minute?
At least speaking to further connect that in with Twin Peaks, the real driving thing that kind of caused that character expansion in the second season was exactly that they revealed the murderer. It sort of was like the whole premise, the whole reason that the show was set up was completed, and then there was a room. And so this may be a stretch for Twin Peaks, but kind of to connect it with the conversation, there was really a resistance. There was there's the main characters, the main players, and they have to be satisfied and have kind of, to an extent, colonize the story before they will allow other characters to have a voice. That's less Twin Peaks and more real life. So I didn't prepare for that part, but that's where I'm thinking so far.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kyle MacLachlan, super hot, like very attractive. Sorry, I just wrote that note down and I thought that might be a question.
I will name them. Kyle MacLachlan in my head will always be Trey from Sex and the City. And so it's funny, all these older shows, as they bring up people, because I'm sure for lots of people, Kyle MacLachlan is Twin Peaks, right? And like, he is Officer Dale Cooper. And yet for me, like, how you come into, do we typecast people in our minds for the rest of their lives? Do we allow actors who have big, character identities to move beyond them?
Well, that really ties, I think, back into the we have a whole lot of expectations as people, and we sort of say expect Kyle MacLachlan to me to be FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper. So I watch Portlandia and I'm angry. And so we definitely have you can see it even to that extent, that our expectations, whenever they're defied, there's a frustration and a lot of resistance there.
I mean, that's my people when I bring up Jezebel being just a preacher no one wanted to listen to, when everyone wants to cast her in other light, right? And it's like, oh no, what we know about her is that she just kept preaching in light of John of Patmos coming at her saying, like, I told you not to listen to that, that woman and all of this, and yet she continues to preach. But that's not the narrative that we have allowed Jezebel to live into often. And I wonder if at least in some of these spaces for, Twin Peaks, Kyle MacLachlan specifically, have we said, but this is Special Agent Dale Cooper, what hurdles does he have to jump through to get, Charlotte's love interest on Sex and the City or Portlandia or things like that, to break away from how we have been typecast in the spaces that we occupy early in our lives?
Yeah. I'd assume that has something to do with the extent to which he made a meaningful impact in one of his roles. There seems to be sort of this tie in us between expectation and what brings us meaning. I've seen oh, I'm trying to think of I've seen plenty of actors that, they can be in one role or another. And Denzel Washington, he can be in any movie. I'll know it's Denzel Washington, and I'm good with it. Whereas like Kyle MacLachlan, I think it's that there was this sort of connection or this meaning that's built where I you almost in shows like Twin Peaks kind of want to place yourself really to an extra extent into Dale Cooper, or like you are Dale Cooper. And so I think the expectation is then when you see Kyle MacLachlan, at least for me, you sort of want to place yourself into his role again, even though he's playing a different role. And so I think, yeah, just there's a strong tie. Of course, we don't get a bunch of expectations about things that didn't mean anything to us.
So is that
Which,
why perhaps people find it hard to evangelize?
hmm,
Sorry, let me tell you my so we want to inhabit DB Cooper, and I'm going to call him DB Cooper because one,
uh-huh,
it just makes me happy they went there.
yeah,
Two, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you watch Loki on Marvel, there's a great DB Cooper gag, which everything ties together. But so with Christ, we're to meet Christ at the table. There's this mystery, there's this presence, there's this repurposing or representing. And it is finding Jesus out in the world, or even proclaiming Jesus out in the world, is different from the space Christ inhabits at the table in worship weekly.
hmm,
I also want to just throw in another thing. What I'm hearing is with Lynch and then with MacLachlan, it's founding pastor syndrome. What happens
yeah,
when the progenitor of a faith community leaves for any reason? So I mean, how do we mourn the second season but embrace the bad in it? Like I love what you said, Spiff, of it didn't work, but now we know it didn't work,
hmm,
which is provocative and curious. It's that hermeneutic again.
Absolutely. Nick, talk to us a little bit about how you see the as you named it, the like underworld of mysticism and spirituality
yeah,
that is at play in Twin Peaks, and what might, as people, as faith leaders, I think that we are often seen as operating in that realm. If you had to say, oh, pastors are in a realm, it would be the realm of faith, mysticism, spirituality, and talk to us about the relationship you see as a faith leader and that realm in the show.
yeah. So that really struck me because I watched the show originally when I was just in college. And it all went over my head and nothing clicked. And then uh after being a pastor and rewatching it, yeah, something just really spoke to me there. And I think um what it was for me was so first in the person of Dale Cooper, I saw him as um almost like a Christological figure in the show where he's this pure in heart one who wants to go into where there's chaos, death, anything like that, and bring new life from it. And and so I think first of all, just the mentality of pure in heart, just willing one thing and one thing alone, um, and being able to name that and track it. And then I think also, there's something to a mode of thinking of revelation. Of a whole lot of Twin Peaks just opens up to really this. At first, the sort of second world, spiritual world, opens up through dreams and through kind of these visions, um, and they slowly expand out more and more. Um, the thing that I really came back to with this watching was it's a Carl Jung quote that ideas have people more than people have ideas.
Hmm.
That you can see this spiritual world, it sort of in a real way in the show, but I think also in my own view of religion and spirituality, beliefs and these people of faith and these legends of our faith, they can inhabit us in a big way and almost in a good way or in a bad way can possess us. And so I think sometimes the role of pastor is just being able to see the real world, but kind of see that underlying spirituality in it, and to be able to name um, whenever something's just a power that be, or a good archetypal thing could be holding on to someone, to help them to try to live that out.
I like that. I will. So I will admit, on my, again, we talked about this last week, but like, so I got ordained on my birthday. So I have like weird traditions about like what it means for me to be kind of like I very much in my life have a like before ministry, after ministry. And that's just because I postured myself with new ethics and new understanding of the person I was called to be. When I first started going to church 10 years ago this year, I took a spiritual like spiritual gifts test, like a spiritual gifts inventory. And one of the things that I never score high on, because I now take this every year to see if my spiritual gifts have changed, but I never score high on exorcism, which always bums me out. And because I'm like, oh, come on, that's got to be something like I can practice this into my worship life, like, or figure that out. But I really liked in Twin Peaks, like that there's just this understanding that some spirits inhabit other spirit, like that would have been a useful spiritual gift to have as a pastor in the world of Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't make light. I mean, it makes light of it in the fact that everything is up for mocking in this world, and yet not, right? Like that it's tied to like the murder of a young woman, and like, and that it forces you to kind of break open some of the more taboo topics that we have talked about, or that society has made taboo, and whatnot. And so I don't know, how do you things that seem so outside of the realm of work that we do day to day, and yet are associated with mysticism, pastoring, spirituality, and tied together in these types of things. How do the two of you talk about that? How do you, like, do you give that any weight? Would that be something that you would engage in further in your spaces?
I've always brought up, so like with Dracula, I know vampires aren't real, but I bring up the lore of Dracula, where if Dracula were coming at you and you were not a practicing believer of Christianity, and you were to hold up 2 pieces of wood as a cross, it wouldn't do anything. The you have to hold to, there is power in this. You have to, from faith, say I'm protected in Christ, or however that is. Weird way to start it up in there. I've been asked to do exorcisms before, or house blessings, or whatever we call it, and I've said I'm happy to go in and burn some sage. Like, I get it. I'm happy to say that this house is under the lordship of Jesus Christ. That whatever may be felt or understood should vacate. However, not my gift, not necessarily my theology, and it's not about me. It's about the people who are going to inhabit the space anyhow. So it's also why I'm not a faith healer. I don't personally believe that can happen. So I would be disingenuous. I don't believe I'm a conduit through which that can happen. There we go. Better way to phrase it.
Yeah.
And therefore it would be fatuous and insincere for me to bid someone on crutches to walk.
And I'll I'm in a similar camp, I think. I'd had, that gets me thinking of in the Gospels, whenever it starts to talk about demons and all of that. And I'll say, first of all, just with demons and spirits and powers and principalities, I think some demythologization's healthy. That, not getting too caught up in there's demons afoot. Although, what do we know? Maybe. But, probably better not to dive into that than just for what it does to your own mind. But, you become like Martin Luther, like throwing the inkwell at the devil in the night. But anyway, the sort of, if demons aren't just sort of demons, like we might think, what could that be? What is it that the gospel writers were trying to reach at? And it's proposed, well, what about say something like debilitating alcoholism, right? Like that's to an extent a possession where something almost seems to have a power over you and it drains you. It takes the life out of you. And so I think you can notice that, and um, you can notice that there's some symptoms and some conditions I think that we see today that we can't solve well through uh, therapeutic or medicinal practices as well as we can about having a conversation about meaning, about direction in life, and to an extent some of that almost seemingly archaic language of like the soul and God and that sort of thing that seems to just pinpoint it a lot more closely than other practices do.
In recovery communities, there's this idea of surrender. The first step,
Yeah.
that we had a problem over whatever, and our lives have become unmanageable, which is very much, I mean, surrender is the word. It's not I can get through this, if it's I can't get through this. And that's, what if God inhabits the space that God was previously unwelcome in? Well, then something else could inhabit said space. I agree with you, is what I'm trying to say, but in so many words.
Oh yeah.
I love it. I mean, I just, there's something I have always found. I collect things. I like to collect things. And so getting rid of things has always been hard. And so the idea of exercising, regardless of what it is, but be it spirits, be it memories, be it just toxicity, how do we let go of those things is always really curious to me. And I think that Twin Peaks does an interesting job of, because there is a lacking of expectation, it helps you get rid of what you have brought into the space and allow what is in the space to be present.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't often do that in churches well, because we bring the own expectations, which limits the ability for, like, let's say the Holy Spirit to do the work that she's about to do. Because we come in and say, oh, but you changed the bread at communion, or, oh, but you have purple paraments up and we're in ordinary time. I can't even worship like this. And we bring so much to the table. What does it look like to leave that, to kind of exercise that out of the system before worship even begins, to allow for what is present to be present and to become something new. And I think that Twin Peaks postures us well into that space, because what our expectations are pseudo horror, like campy, like Days of Our Lives feeling sort of a space. And what it does is say, and more.
It gets to be what it is, as opposed to what we demand it be.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think I want to go back to Dale Cooper and just sort of how he navigates that, because I think that may have a lesson for pastors, because he's going into Twin Peaks, think of it as being called to a new parish. He's going into Twin Peaks and he's just meeting all the people and dealing with sort of what he's got to deal with. And really, what I noticed in him is, first of all, he was just present with people. He was giving to their terms, that if they had a way of expressing something or something that came up that was very meaningful to them, it's meaningful to him. He took it on. Second, that he was just diligent. He sort of saw the overly, the sort of meta issue at hand, which was solving Laura Palmer's murder. For us, it may be, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he was just pure in heart the whole time, right? So I really love that he would just view all of these surreal, crazy things, but he just sort of took it on, accepted it, and walked forward with it. And I think it's somewhere in that, just being with your people and being sort of shooting straight with them, but being generous to their terms. Really just continuing to be diligent with the main thing. And I forgot the last one I was going to say, but that whatever I said a moment ago, those are the three things.
Thank you, Rick Perry.
That's right. Oh yeah.
I like it. Well, again, I think it goes back to, and I like the idea that it's a new parish, because I had that kind of similar vision for it as well, is that, you know, he could see things and know where to look for things that people within the community, because you're so steeped in it, don't have the ability to be objective in that way. And so I think it's why it's important that, you know, while I'm fine with settled pastors, I do think that for me, I will say, I like the idea of a community calling me every 7 years, even if I stay in that community, because biologically, like, our cells regenerate. We're an entirely new person every 7 years. Everyone is an entirely new person every 7 years. And so if I am new, that means the church is new. And so for me, it's what does that look like to recall me, or to say, maybe this isn't the right space, or whatever. For me, I like that regenerative property, because you get to then start again and look for the new clues, you know, look under the fingernails of the church that, you know, previously you didn't know to look for before. And I think that he does that well in saying, like, here are my gifts and expertise. I have been brought to this community to see these things that have yet to be seen, and to point you towards community focus. And then also I'm tied to this bigger thing, and I can leave and he can go, you know, because he is FBI. He's not FBI Twin Peaks, but it's like writ large. He's come from outer, so there's a new place for him to go as well. And so that momentum that he brings, even while he's in one place, I think is really helpful for churches to understand its leadership's momentum as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that tracks right.
Yeah, it's good.
So with mystery, and the mystery being solved, so I will admit that I'm not a good mystic. I guess I'm working on it, but I live so much in my own head that I can't, and I have to do like intentional spiritual direction about it, and blah 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 blah. Mystery is the key part of the show, and you'd brought up they just solved the mystery halfway through season 2, and then it's like, you know, and isn't that where then Cooper is framed for being a drug lord? Because and that's why he can't leave town. And also he's the lead character of a show called The Name of the Town He Can't Leave.
Oh yeah. I think drug lords, that's an example of what not to do in ministry.
Well,
so probably true.
How do we cultivate that sense of like the mystery driving our ministry, not just the mystery being okay, we can't understand the table, great, but let's do business as usual. How do we almost Scooby-Doo it, right? How do we engage the mystery, engage it, put the clues together? Where's people with spreadsheets that say, well, this sermon, I got these clues about Jesus out of it?
I think, you know, it says something, this was something I was thinking about with Twin Peaks that I think would speak to that God is, of course, in one sense, apathetic, but there's always another step behind the symbols and the names we use. You know, Pseudo Dionysius talks about every name of God is and isn't the name of God, that we can never capture the essence or contain God and have it solved. And I think that's the truth to any great mystery. In Twin Peaks, it sort of shows us an antipole of that, you know, you even as they kind of wrapped up the mystery and the killer's been found, it's then that new questions are then presented of, you know, this is going to ruin it. You've had over 25 years to watch it, so
we're a spoiler show, so it's okay.
Yeah, but so they find out the killer is basically kind of a demon that is inhabiting someone, and so then it's, well, where is this demon? What does he represent in this strange world? And where did he originate? And a lot of that's answered in the third season, 25 years later. And of course, then there's always, point being, there's always sort of these questions beyond what you initially sought out to answer it. So I think that's in the process of these ecclesial conversations we're having, of kind of developing a functional theology and, you know, understanding, say, who Jesus is. We're always moving towards an answer that presents more questions. And so you're never done with that.
Well, it's kind of like, why are we still Christians after the resurrection, right? I mean, like, or after Easter, like we figured it out. Here's the end, right in the middle of our year. We figured out the killer right in the middle of the season. What do you do?
Wrong all along. Oh, sorry.
Exactly. But so, and yet we keep going with ministry. We keep going with our work because it in fact, it invites more questions and invites a deeper understanding to the work that we are called to do, every year, kind of like liturgically, but also, within the story of our lives. This is, the Twin Peaks story. It says that even though the murderer, every year at Christmas, Jesus is born, and yet we know 4 months later we will be, at his tomb. And it's like the cycle, we know what comes next, and yet it doesn't stop us from moving forward into these spaces and being curious about what these spaces have called us to do.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I like that comparison. I see additionally that, if you think about Twin Peaks as like coming out in 1990 against the backdrops of like, think about a cop show at that time. It was very much the serialized sort of thing of like the agent shows up, he solves the case, and he's out. And next episode, it's the same thing. And here in Twin Peaks, even whenever the initial mystery is solved, it really does well to explore how an event can just have this outpouring effect onto all the people in the community. And so it's not just solving the mystery in and of itself, it's also sort of taking that and molding it within people in real time, to address the grief that's felt and the sort of fallout of the death of Laura Palmer. And what does that look like to be there for a community, to actively, you aren't just solving, say, the death of Laura Palmer as an objective thing that happened. You're also sort of configuring it in each of the people in the community. If you're D.L. Cooper, or I think as a minister, you're kind of you're seeking to find the resurrection in each of the congregants and everybody you interact with. So it's not just the one-time event, but it's also how it's received by everyone.
I'll admit that I appreciate that, and I like that a lot. And it was, the acting is so campy. It has a real The Room vibe. I was like, you are tearing me apart, Lisa.
You haven't done The Room yet.
I know,
deuces.
We need to do The Room, but it has a feel of that, right? You have that, it has that very played affect of of conversation and acting and things. And so therefore, even in the moments of like grief, it feels put on. And so I longed for the authenticity there, and yet was like, oh, and this is the difference in why this is informative and not informative for what we're doing, and not the goal for what we are doing. It's like, oh, this, there was for whatever reason, as I was watching last night, I was like, it taught me some skill set, or reminded me of the skill set of what it means to be like a holy listener, right? An intentionally holy listener, because these people are just saying lines on top of each other to do it. And it's a choice that they're making, that it is not like, had they, you put Meryl Streep in the middle of Twin Peaks and you're going to feel something, but this is not that. And it's intentionally not that, because it says in the world that you do live in, you're going to see that, and you're going to know this is wrong, and you're going to see the authenticity, and you're going to know how to actually juxtapose those things and listen well.
Yeah.
Please.
I was just, you almost, it seems almost like a soap opera in a lot of it. The very, just like you're saying, the lines delivered just one over top of the other, and a very superficial kind of way, it seems. I'll say the return, you got to get through the whole show. It's on you if you want to watch the movie. But the return, it's sort of, instead of kind of putting a play on cop shows and soap operas, it's a return on our fixation with like reboot culture. And so it's like a reboot movie, but playing against that. So again, resisting expectations.
You know, a few years ago, I did a sermon series on Leviticus because
Huh.
I've just found some really good rabbinical work, and it was all holiness code stuff.
Mhm.
At the church I was serving at the time, the readings were always would end with "This is the word of the Lord," and people would say "Thanks be to God." And one, I think it was the prohibition on well, same sex assault, but we it's often
Mhm.
trotted out against the LGBTQ community. The person did the reading and went, "This is the word of the Lord," and no one said "Thanks be to God," and it was kind of amazing. I think after that sermon they would, because I
Oh
find
yeah,
something else
turn
that,
it around on them.
but it was it's breaking that expectation, and it's
Mhm.
inviting people into the space that breaks it. I do want to be cognizant of our time, and that is one of my jobs as the co-host of Two on One. We do have a final question, and one of my other jobs as a co-host of Two on One is to throw it over to Stephanie because she is better at asking it than I am.
Uh, I mean, I feel like I could talk about this all day. Nick, I've missed talking to you. I've missed
Yeah.
our long form chats, just hanging out and pushing each other in fun directions. So please do come back. You are a joy in my life. I've missed seeing you. But our final question is, as always, what biblical story, book, theme, character are you most reminded of in Twin Peaks?
Hmm. I think, and you touched on this a little bit before with Jezebel, but I think the book of Revelation. I think, well, really just the revelations in general, whether it be, Paul on the road to Damascus, but just sort of falling into this vision or this reality that was not discerned. It doesn't even make discernible sense to an extent, but it's received as um, the reality you have to deal with and just how you navigate that. And so I think to an extent, the very vision like language of revelation or anything that gets oddly mystical and spiritual, where you're seeing more truths than you are realities. Um,
Hmm.
I see a loose connection just in sort of how David Lynch is doing that. In terms of the central, I was thinking about, I don't know if this is a good connection, but it's what I've got. Laura Palmer, she's found dead in the first episode, and she's in a spiritual way, found to be still living, and that there's, while on this plane of existence, if you're to call it, there's this witness and this outreach and this witnessing to just what happened there, to try to reconcile and to move forward. But in another sense, she is still living and still um, really guiding the whole show. I think that definitely has uh, that has something to be said about the whole death and resurrection of Jesus.
Mm.
Totally.
That's what I got so far.
Well done.
Yeah.
Arthur?
I'm going to go that First Timothy, Second Timothy, and Titus, the author of those books, is Paul's doppelganger.
Mm. Oh.
Because
Oh, that's a good one.
if you break the canon into the original 7 and then the disputed 3 and then the 3, there's radical Paul, there's reactionary Paul, and then there's redactive Paul. First Timothy, Second Timothy, and Titus, if I could open up the canon and throw them out, I would tomorrow, because it not only undoes what Paul was suggesting, and admittedly Paul has way too much sway on Christianity. We've taken the apostle and Plato and like made that a trinity with Jesus Christ, and I get it. Okay. See, I can do it too. But Paul, whoever wrote First Tim, Second Tim, and Titus, did it under Paul's name and took his authority and locked him away in the lodge for centuries.
Oh.
Last word from Paul, and it's not even Paul.
Oh, that's good. I like that a lot. Mine's way simpler, and I went just because, again, limited access and knowledge of all of these. But I'm gonna go with the dreamers, particularly. Jacob, I think, is there. Like Jacob, we love Jacob, and yet Jacob has done some real shady-ish in his time, and yet his dreams that help inform the way in which we are to engage each other, and know about each other. I think that all the dream sequences of the Bible kind of do the same thing, in which, similarly to Twin Peaks, how dreams help and dreamscapes help inform how we are to interact and understand each other.
Oh,
So I went with that.
yeah.
So none of us went with Sinai and Horeb for Twin Peaks. That's kind of sad.
I didn't go Witch of Endor. There's a lot of things that I thought about.
Yeah, I was thinking as well of similarly to Spiff, your answer of just Joseph. He's able to rise through the ranks and functionally get things done day to day based on visions he's having in the night.
And like, can you imagine us just doing that? Like, my dreams are so wild that I'm like, if I were to use them to inform my life, I would just go off the rails.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
My dreams are just consistently, I am late.
Oh.
I should probably talk to my shrink about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That might be saying something.
211 is sponsored by Jeff Wunrow Designs. I'm going to put up our screen for the visually inclined, and remind folk to check out Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNROW.com for catalog customization and all sorts of beautiful handmade liturgical textiles. Nick, thank you. It is such a pleasure to meet you and to get to talk to you about something you very clearly care substantially about. And thank you for sharing your passion with us.
Absolutely.
Beth, who's coming up on our docket?
Next week we have Tyler Heston, and he is coming, and we're staying in the vein of the mystic and the weird and the sci-fi, and we are talking X-Files. And very excited about that. I am an X-Files person, so primarily to David Duchovny. Hey, Dave. This is a dating show, right? This is where I like come out and I'm like, hey, David Duchovny, why don't you love me?
No, wait, I'm married.
Yeah. Anyway, and then after that, we have Minister Candace Simpson coming to close out Pride, and very excited about all that are happening. And then Christmas in July.
Advent. This is technically our Advent right now. So
is our Advent.
It's closer than we expected this year. Oh, my mind is blown.
Oh, that was good. Yep. Yeah. Pride is our Advent. Pride should be every Advent. I'm so here for that.
That would be awesome. Hope, peace, joy, and sass. Okay, we are going to wrap it up. This has been 2 on 1. Nick Koontz, thank you again and again and again. And deuces, we'll see you later.